Yo, what's good everyone? My name is Alex and I'm a photographer and content creator. My Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra is finally here after being delayed 3 times. By now, it has been over 2 months since this phone was released, and full disclaimer, I pre-ordered it in early February with my own money. But now that it's finally here, I'm really excited to get on with this photographer's review video. I apologize if I sound sick because I'm still recovering from a cold, but I just could not wait any longer and I had to test this phone out to give you guys the full review. I'll start this off with a POV segment where I take the device out on the street and show you guys what it's like shooting with the device in real life situations. Spoiler alert, the cameras are amazing and I took a ton of really great photos throughout my testing. In this video, you'll see me use the auto, night mode, pro mode, and as well as the expert raw app. It's going to be a really in-depth video with tons of examples, comparisons, and video footage. Then after the POV, we'll dive into Lightroom where we can zoom in at 100% and really pixel peep at these images to see what this camera system is capable of. And of course, I'll be showing you guys the social media examples where I shoot with both Snapchat and Instagram, so definitely stick around for that. But before we get into it, I want to thank Skillshare for sponsoring this video. If you don't know, Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of online classes and members across 150 countries. I wanted to join Skillshare to learn more about videography to further improve my videos here on YouTube. One of the recent classes I took was called iPhone Filmmaking, Create Cinematic Video with Your Phone by Caleb and Niles from Moment. The main takeaway for me was that shooting with your phone can allow you to do more experimental shots, and those kinds of shots can help tell your story or be cool B-roll footage. And this was useful because I shoot with my phone all the time for YouTube. I love how you can watch a quick video on Skillshare and then take your learnings and apply it immediately. So if you want to learn something new or dive deeper into your passion, check out the link in my description. The first 1,000 people to sign up through that link or use my code ALEXZhang will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare.
Okay, so it is a very cold and windy day here in New York City, and I'm shooting this with the front-facing camera on the Galaxy S22 Ultra. It's really windy, so I don't know how the mic is picking up my voice, but hopefully you guys can hear me okay. I'm shooting on 4K 30, so the quality should be pretty decent.
Starting off the POV segment, I like the way the light was hitting the side of this building, and I thought it was a great test to see how the phone handles this kind of lighting. This first photo was taken in auto mode, and to me it looks a bit too bright and flat. This is probably due to the HDR kicking in, because you can see that blue sky in the top left and all the shadows are lifted. So for this next shot, I switch over to the Pro mode to manually adjust my settings. I put the ISO to the lowest value and increase the shutter speed to lower the overall exposure. I wanted to achieve a more contrasty and dramatic photo to emphasize the light and shadows. And you can see that while using Pro mode, the HDR did not kick in and the sky on the top left is blown out. Next, in the same exact location, I pulled up the Expert Raw app. This is a separate app that you can download from the Galaxy Store, and it's supposed to allow you to have manual controls over every lens, along with computational RAW. So I tried to match the same manual settings as Pro mode, and I captured this shot. You can see it looks very similar to the shot that I took in auto, with the HDR kicking in and brightening up the image. Moving on, I wanted to test out the zoom capabilities, so I took a series of shots at 10x, 30x, and 100x. The 10x lens seems to perform really well with crisp, clean lines and great color. No over-sharpening that you usually see with a telephoto lens. And I have to say, the 30x shot was surprisingly clear, but I wouldn't really use the 100x option. On this street corner, I decided to test out some social media apps. So first I have Snapchat pulled up and I took a photo. Then I switched over to Instagram and I took the same shot. I would say that both apps seem pretty well optimized for photos and are on par with the Google Pixel 6 Pro, but I really have to compare those phones side by side in order to find out. Next, as I was walking around, I noticed these beautiful archways with the golden hour light spilling across them. I used Pro mode here to manually control the exposure because it was super high contrast. And the photo ended up looking like what I had imagined in my head, so I was pretty happy with this result. Next, I switched to the 3x lens and I'm still in Pro mode to capture a tighter composition. Now this was my favorite of the bunch because I loved how her hat and scarf matched the color of the brick. Now switching over to the Expert RAW app, you can see I was trying to capture the guy walking. I could only take 2 photos before I had to wait for it to finish processing. This is definitely not good, especially for street photography. Here's another example of using the Expert RAW mode and once again seeing that lag. I could only take 2 shots here before having to wait a couple of seconds for it to process. And as powerful as the Expert RAW app is supposed to be, for this reason alone, I can't recommend it at this time, especially if you like to shoot on the fly and capture those time-critical moments. Next up, this liquor store caught my attention due to the bright neon sign up top. I am using auto mode here and I wanted to see how the S22 Ultra renders the light. I wait for some people to walk into the frame and I captured this shot. The sign turned out to look more orange than in real life, but you could still see the individual neon tubes, which was cool. A few steps further down, there were more neon signs in this bar window. And as I was framing up the shot, someone opened the door to go inside, and the phone had no issues or lag capturing this quick moment. Moving indoors, we are now at Fulton Center with this amazing architecture. Using the ultra-wide camera, I am able to capture the glass rail in front of me all the way up to the open circular ceiling. I was surprised by just how wide this lens is, and it makes the shot feel so much more dramatic. Then I moved over to the side to do a lookup shot with a different composition. And here's a different shot with a similar composition, but you can see the textures of the diamonds better. The HDR worked really well because you can see the blue sky through the ceiling. Lastly, here's a video comparison between Snapchat and Instagram. Coming up the escalator at the Oculus, this is another very popular landmark in New York City with amazing architecture. Due to the size of this space, this was a great time to test out the different cameras to see how well the zoom can do. So I started right off with the 100x and it was able to render the elevator text pretty clear, but no real texture or detail. Then shooting with the 10x, we see more of the scene and everything looks sharp and well exposed. You can even see outside of the glass doors, which was really impressive. With the 3x camera, we see more of the beams and I really like the way the phone rendered the light and shadows. And at 1x, we can see a bit of the sky and the clouds through the middle of the ceiling opening. Finally, at 0.6x, you can pretty much see everything and capture the entire space. Looking at these side by side, I am really impressed by how uniform these shots look. All of the colors and exposures are pretty consistent. And it's crazy to think that you have the kind of camera tech in your pocket where you can zoom from 0.6x all the way to 100x. Alright, now we're moving into some night shots. At the waterfront, there is this boat slowly moving and I zoom in to try and capture it. Shooting in auto, the night mode kicked in by itself, and the image doesn't look too great. I try to take the shot again, and this second image looks significantly sharper than the first, even though both were using the 3x camera on auto. Then I tried the 10x camera and this shot came out terrible. I realized that in low light, the phone doesn't actually switch to the super telephoto lens, so the images suffer greatly from digital zoom. Not even an edit can save this shot. Next, I tried to do a night mode comparison. So this first shot was taken in auto, and you can see it looks pretty good. Switching over to night mode, this image also looks very similar to the first. However, when you put them side by side, you can see significantly more detail and sharpness in the night mode shot. And I tried it again with another comparison, this time using auto mode without the night mode, and shooting with night mode on. And these next few shots of this building really surprised me because of the clarity and color that the phone was able to retain in such a dark environment. And then I tried this shot in night mode and it even further enhanced that. This last shot of the night was taken in front of a bar with a guy smoking outside and two motorcycles parked out front. I loved this scene and I used the ultra wide to be able to capture everything in the frame. And lastly, here is a night video comparison between Snapchat and Instagram. Notice on Snapchat that you are able to zoom in significantly more and with higher quality compared to Instagram. Alright, now we're in Lightroom and starting off, we're looking at this wide angle shot of this mural and construction. So looking at the whole image, it's clear that the shadows have been lifted significantly in the foreground. However, the mural also does look washed out and not as vibrant as it should be. Zooming in at 100%, it looks good at first glance with plenty of texture and detail. However, upon closer inspection, the details are not really clearly defined. It almost looks like a watercolor painting, especially noticeable in the left-hand side with objects in the dumpster, the chain link fence, and the trees. Next, we have the same mural shot with the 3x zoom. This is probably the most commonly used zoom lens because 10x is way too tight for everyday shots. And I'm happy to see really good sharpness and color reproduction throughout the frame. Even the extreme corners are nice and sharp with no smearing or loss of detail. And finally, we have a shot taken with the 10x lens. You can see just how close this lens is able to get. And zooming in at 100%, you can see significant detail in the brick and the paint texture. Nothing looks over-sharpened or over-processed, and all of the colors look very natural. Next up, we are looking at another ultra-wide shot in the Oculus. Like I mentioned in the POV segment, I am really impressed with how this phone was able to render all of the light and shadows. It looks really beautiful, and being able to see that bit of blue sky and white clouds peeking through the skylight is just mind-blowing. This image was taken with the 1x lens while I was walking down the hallway and people were walking towards me. So I was not standing still when this photo was taken, just to test out the motion blur and image stabilization. Overall, it looks pretty good. You can't really tell there's any motion blur from the camera itself until you look at the tiles at the very edge of the frame. But if you look at the top of the frame, the holes in the ceiling are all very well defined and detailed, so I was very surprised by this image. Now let's do some RAW comparisons. This is the RAW file from using Pro mode, and this is the processed JPEG from the phone. Flipping back and forth, you can see the differences and how the JPEG is darker than the RAW file. But the most interesting aspect is when you zoom in. Pay attention to the textures on the wall and the hair on the RAW file. Switching over to the JPEG, you can see significant loss in detail on the stone and the hair. And this is weird to me because generally when you are recovering highlights and bringing those bright areas down, you should see more of that detail, not less. And looking at the shadows, you can see significantly more noise in the RAW file, which is to be expected. And it's cleaned up pretty nicely in the JPEG. However, you do also lose sharpness due to that noise reduction. This next image is another RAW file from Pro mode. This one is interesting because the colors here look off. It looks like the tint is skewed slightly towards green. Flipping over to the RAW file from the Expert RAW app, you can see the tones shift slightly where the yellow taxi looks more natural compared to the RAW file from Pro mode. And zooming into the Expert RAW file, pay attention to the wheel of the taxi as I flip back to the Pro mode RAW. The expert RAW file is much sharper. However, it does look like it was over sharpened and digitally enhanced. And this is another reason why computational RAW may sound like a good idea, but if the device is processing all of my RAWs this heavily, then what's the point of shooting RAW to begin with? Now let's analyze some night shots. This first image of the Roosevelt Island tram was taken as it was moving. And although the motion is slow, I was happy to see that everything looks pretty sharp. However, the cars definitely have motion blur due to the slower shutter speed. The shadows also seem to be lifted, and you can see a good amount of noise as well. But again, I'd rather have some noise and detail rather than the whole image look like a painting. But I feel like the noise reduction algorithm can do better. This image of the boat was shot with the 10x zoom. However, it is clear that the phone didn't actually switch to use the lens and instead cropped in digitally. There are no details whatsoever and all of the colors are off. This next image uses the ultra wide in front of the bar, and zooming in, the details look pretty good. For a low light shot, I am very impressed with this image. The red sign looks slightly blown out, but fairly color accurate, and all of the other neon signs in the windows look great. Now let's do some night mode comparison. So on the left we have the regular shot taken on auto, and on the right is the night mode shot. Zooming in, you can see much more detail and sharpness in the right image. The building windows are more defined, the colors are more vibrant, and when you move down to the grass, you can see significantly more detail in the night mode shot. Here's another comparison, and while both of these images aren't exactly clear, the night mode shot on the right was able to render the buildings much better. And surprisingly, the wooden piers didn't look too different between both images. But you can notice the smoother water in the night mode image due to that longer shutter speed. For the last comparison, both of these images look good in full view. The left image was taken on auto with night mode, so the shutter speed was already slower. But the right image was taken with the dedicated night mode, and you can still see more detail, better colors, and a cleaner image. Moving down to the dry weeds is where you can see the most difference. I was shocked at how much more clear the night mode image was, because in auto mode it also triggered that night mode setting. So to sum it up, the Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra has a very impressive set of cameras and pretty good software to go along with it. From the 0.6x all the way to 100x zoom, it's clear that you're pretty much covered for any shooting situation. Sometimes you can get amazing shots straight out of the device, but other times the processing can look a bit grainy, blotchy, and just overall lower quality. There are also even more features that I wasn't able to get to, like Pro Video Mode, Portrait Video, Director's View, Hyperlapse, and more. This is definitely one of the most robust camera systems on a phone, and the editing software has really useful features as well, like this object removal tool. It's only been 2 months since this phone came out, so I'm sure with more updates, they can improve the camera performance and post-processing as well. If you guys have this device, let me know what your experience has been. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. These types of in-depth photography review videos take a ton of time to shoot and edit. And if you want to see more content like this, definitely subscribe, because I have a few more videos coming up about this device. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.